Well, I'm from San Antonio, Texas originally. I was born and raised there and lived there most of my life. About 9 years ago, I moved up to Colorado, and originally we were in Commerce City, and about a year after that, I moved up to Estes. And it's a lot closer to what I wanted out of Colorado, being in the mountains and really changing the direction of my photography and video production to wildlife and nature. Okay. A lot of what I do with landscape shots is they're HDRs, but I try to not make them look like an HDR, because they can go over the top. An HDR is a combination of several photos, usually at different exposures, put them together, and that way you have the highs and the lows looking a little bit more normal. Nothing's blown out and nothing's too dark, and you see more detail. I like that. And it's something that I'm constantly playing with and tweaking with, and try not to get too extreme. But then once you've got that thing balanced, then you start looking at the artistic side of what can be a little bit different. And so you go to specific areas of the photo. You think, well, it would be nice to go ahead and bring this up a little bit or bring that down a little bit. And sometimes you sort of lasso the primary area of a photograph, and you take the outer area and you soften it or darken it, and you feather it a whole lot so it doesn't look like you did that. You can create a mood, by doing that, and by specifically adding or taking away certain areas, the brightness of them. And so you sort of manipulate where your audience is going to look, and that's the primary area of it. I like doing that a lot. You create moods. December 2nd, I think, was the day of the moon itself. So, and it's basically a composite, but the moon itself was 27 photos that I just shot at different exposures and then combined them together. Now, they don't stay lined up because the moon's moving when you have a long lens, a 600 millimeter. So you have to line them up in Photoshop and also to some degree Lightroom. And I put them together in Lightroom in sets of 3s. Brings them together pretty well. Then I took those layers into Photoshop and adjusted the opacity, each one. And that's why you're able to see the colors that are in there. And those colors are there on the moon. We just don't see them, And there are people that question that's not real, that's not natural, but it is. Go look at NASA's photos. Those colors are there. Now we're at a high altitude and our air is thin, and I got lucky. It was very clean that night too. So I was able to get good captures of it. And I tried a couple of times to process it and didn't like what I got, and finally did. And then I put it on a different sky background that I shot on a different night, which also happened to have a meteor going through it, because I just thought it would make a nice background to it. And it's a difficult thing to get the process down, but now that I know how to do it, I'll probably do more things like that. Yeah, this time of year, the Milky Way doesn't come up till about 4 in the morning, just a little bit before sunrise. That happens starting the end of February. So it comes up late, it comes up from the south to the north, and it makes a nice arc. It makes a beautiful shot, but you only have maybe an hour before the sun interferes with that shot. It's kind of nice, but you got to catch it just right. And it's to the east. Can't have the moon in the way. Things like that. City lights, stuff like that can really interfere with being able to see it. As we get closer to the summer, it comes up higher and higher, and by July, it's up from dark till daylight. It goes up the whole time, and it actually then goes basically straight overhead. So it makes a nice straight up and down shot, but you don't have the complete arc of it, which is only available in the spring from like late February to late April. Part of why I bracket, because you want light areas and dark areas and a normal area to all have a good exposure, and then you bring them together. Because you start manipulating things and, ooh, that really looks cool. And it does, kind of, but it doesn't look very natural. And it's not that it isn't. There's nothing there that isn't real. It's just that our eyes don't see that stuff at the same time. Because you have, if you concentrate in the dark area as you're looking at something, you can see detail. But your eyes aren't going to see it all at the same time. Well, with HDR, you can. It's high dynamic range. I shoot Nikon cameras. For the most part, I have three. I have a Nikon D500, which is primarily for wildlife because it shoots fast. And then I have a Nikon D810, which is a little bit older, and a Nikon D50. And that's a high megapixel camera for landscape. And it's not as fast as the D500, but the sensor on it is incredible. So I do a real good job with landscape stuff with that. So with astrophotography, which I do a lot of that, not just the moon, but Milky Way and those kind of things. And it has, 47 megapixels, so you got a big file to work with. It gives you a lot of good detail, and you have an excellent dynamic range within the sensor. So even if you don't do multiple exposures, you can manipulate to get your lights and dark, as long as you're close, with that pretty well.
Basically, in this shot, we're looking at Hallis Peak. The foreground is kind of nice too, so I'm at a lower angle, trying to get the brush in front also to give me a little more depth to the shot.
Nikon, Canon, Sony, they all have excellent cameras. With DSLR, it's a good way to go. And if you want, depending on how much money you want to spend, you go with a full frame camera or a crop sensor. A crop sensor is usually something like a 1.4 or 1.5 multiplier. So you get a nice throw, you get things closer, but you can't go on the wider end as easily. For wildlife, that's great. That works out good. And my D500 is a crop sensor. The camera also shoots faster. And for landscape, then you want to go full frame.
Focusing primarily on halides, but with enough depth that you can still see this clearly enough. Now, there's a process known as focus stacking, where you would take multiple shots focusing on the foreground, the mid area, and then the far area, the background, which would be halides. And then you can combine the focus area of those shots together so everything is sharp.